Good afternoon, everyone. How are you all doing? Okay, you've had lunch, you've had one session. Well, welcome. My name is Michelle Whittingham, and I am the Associate Vice Chancellor of Enrollment Management from the University of California, Santa Cruz. And it is truly an honor to be here with all of you today. Before we get started, I want to make sure you know where the University of California, Santa Cruz is located to give you a little bit of context about the experience that we're going to be sharing with you today. So, how many of you have been to California before? Okay, very good. Anybody to Santa Cruz previously? Oh my gosh, this is crazy. You exceeded my expectations. So we're literally in the middle part of the state, and we're one of 10 of the University of California campuses. And so again, really, really pleased to be here. We have a couple of other guests, but before we do our introductions, I want to get a sense of how many of you are representing the high schools today? Okay, excellent, excellent. Colleges and universities. Okay, we're going to put a lot of pressure on you too over this, so we're really happy. We were really hoping to see a combination, so really pleased with that combination today. So, Raja, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Can you hear me okay? At the back? Okay. My name is Raja Guha Thakurta. I'm a professor of astronomy and astrophysics. Again, very happy to be here. Welcome to our session. I'm happy to be representing the University of California, Santa Cruz at this session. We have a third presenter for this session, and I'm going to bring her on in just a second. Give me a moment, please. And let me see. Sorry.
While Raj is working on this, how many of you have had your own high school students who've worked on any kind of research, even if it's maybe not at the university level, would you say? So some of your students have worked on research. Wow, that is really impressive.
So
okay.
We have Mrs. Carr on screen. Mrs. Carr, would you mind saying a few words by way of introduction, please? Thank you.
And greetings from Modern High School, Kolkata. So I'm really happy to be a part of this panel, but I wish I could have been there in person.
Thank you,
Was
Mrs.
that clear?
Did you all hear which high school she's from? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, excellent.
All right. So I'm going to go back to our slides. And here we go.
Well, and today we have quite an agenda for you, and I encourage you, if you have questions throughout, to please ask. We're going to start with a question, and then we're going to talk a little bit about a high school perspective before Raja will get into talking about our summer Science Internship Program. On our campus, we have about 17,000 undergraduate students and 2,000 graduate students. And so one of the things that really comes to our mind, and I think I'll go ahead and even go to the next slide, is, again, and I'm impressed with how many of your students are already working with undergraduate research, but I wanted to start with this question to get a sense of what your thoughts are in terms of, is it worthwhile for high school students to take time away from test preparation and their current school curriculum to work on open-ended problem solving? Oh, that was really quick. So we see a consensus. Okay, Raja, we've done our work. Well, this is something that, again, there's a lot of different perspectives, and being here at this conference is really, really a magical experience. And I think there are so many changes happening, not only in US, but particularly here in the US or in the Indian education system. And again, even yesterday at the Presidential Forum, we spoke about not teaching students certain things, but teaching them how to learn, not just teaching them about what we want them to learn, but thinking about this open-ended question. And I think a lot of us, perhaps yourselves included, when you went to college, I know myself, the first college classroom I sat in and the professor asked me why, I froze. I didn't know how to answer the question because I could memorize just about anything and walk through, but nobody had ever asked me for my opinion before. And so my goal, thinking about this question today, is we'll transition then to Mrs. Carr to get some thoughts on the high school perspective.
Sure, I'm going to do the 4 levels of engagement before.
Oh, perfect. Yes, you are correct.
So just to, I think I speak for Mrs. Carr and Michelle when I say that we are firm believers in the answer to this question being yes. And that's what brings us here, really. The most important problems in the world today, things like global warming, hunger, economic crises, wars, the answers to these problems are not on page 99, at least not even the odd-numbered problems are on page 99. That the real world doesn't work like that, and yet we train our students, we evaluate our students through high school and college to solve problems where they go in knowing that there is an answer to the problem and somebody else has worked out the path. So when they don't find the answer, they find themselves feeling inadequate in their academic preparation. That's just not how the real world works. So bridging the gap between how high school education, evaluation, especially in STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, work, and how the real world works is what this session is all about. So I want to present 4 levels or 4 stages of engagement of high school students with STEM research. You'll notice that the 4 blocks get successively deeper shades of gray. They represent deeper levels of engagement of students with research. So the first of these labels is access, enrichment, and exposure. This is the shallowest level of engagement. In this kind of activities happen a lot at science museums, at, let's say, planetariums. It happens through videos. If you watch David Attenborough's Life on Earth, if you watch Neil deGrasse Tyson's Cosmos or Carl Sagan's Cosmos, one person can reach millions, if not billions, of children. And the important thing in this is to recognize that science is not limited to the reporting of scientific results in newspapers. When newspapers report scientific results, you see the results, you don't see the people or the process behind the research. You don't see the many failures that led up to that success. You don't see the people. Very importantly, you don't see the people. So I was a student in India, I was a good student in India, and when I studied, I would have been led to believe that all of science is done by people who are male, white, and dead. Okay. There were pictures of Einstein and Darwin and Edison in my textbooks. I was one of these 3 things. I was never going to be the second, and I didn't want to be the third, right? I didn't want to be dead. So breaking this syndrome is really important. That's what happens through access, enrichment, exposure. The second kind of activity is research skills building. This is when students actually engage in the research process by learning some of the tools of the trade. The most important research skill today is learning how to program a computer. That can be used for a wide range of sciences today, wide range of humanities subjects, wide range of any discipline pretty much requires computer programming skills. But there's, of course, lab techniques, fieldwork techniques that are relevant for certain sciences. There are soft skills like technical reading. I had never seen a science article till I went to graduate school. I hadn't seen it in college. I hadn't seen it in high school. So breaking that barrier is important. Learning how to communicate. Communication is such an important part of STEM. It's a much overlooked part of STEM. And there are many other foundational skills. Now, so skills building is a deeper engagement. It's hands-on. The first one isn't. Now, these two, the first 2 categories are highly scalable. One person putting in a lot of work can reach millions, if not billions, of children, like we said. David Attenborough videos have reached all kinds of people, a large number of people around the world. The Khan Academy, its programming can teach lots of kids around the world. When we get to the third category, where you are applying these skills in a problem-solving context, it's much harder to scale these programs. You need lots of mentors because each mentor can at most take on a few students through processes like this. In this third category, what you're doing is you take something that was recently published and you walk students through that process. So I've done that with Mrs. Carr's students. She'll talk about this in a few minutes, where the research is already published, but students got a sense of the process and the people. And they really saw the sort of the trial and error aspect of research. The final category is open-ended research, where the students are actually helping their mentors with the research. The mentor and students ask questions together, they stumble together, they get up together, they learn from their stumbles and they make progress together. So open-ended research, the way I'm defining it here, is any research that has the potential to be published. So these are the 4 steps that I feel create a ramp between the way we teach our students in high school and college and the real-world problem solving today. Okay, so with this, I'm going to hand over to Mrs. Carr, but did you want to say anything, Michelle, in between? Or?
Yeah, I think we'll go ahead and get Mrs. Carr on the screen. And really, to kick off Mrs. Carr's section, one of the questions I was really intrigued with when we started to work together on this session was to ask Mrs. Carr, how was it that you first got involved to work with Raja to even begin to think about the high school students doing this level of research?
Just before that, if I may ask,
Please.
we were talking of STEM right now, and one of the things that's being focused increasingly is the importance of liberal arts, which actually does not delineate itself from science and engineering courses. So
Oh, sorry. Mrs. Carr, I'm going to, just give me a moment, please. Just to repeat your question, the word that's being increased, the acronym that's being used more and more is STEAM. And I completely agree that the liberal arts should not be separated from any of this. In fact, the broader umbrella under which one should consider this is critical thinking. And there's critical thinking, there's as much critical thinking in history, in art history, in economics. So the programs we'll talk about in a minute include many of the social sciences, but by rights should include all aspects of basic research. Mrs.
Yes,
Carr, I'm going to hand you over to you. Yeah.
I was going to say, Raja, that we talk about STEAM now.
STEAM.
Science, technology, engineering, arts, and medicine. So the arts shouldn't be left out. So as I was saying, Raja used to come to Modern High School every single year. That's because his sister is an ex-student of this school, and his niece too studied in this school. So he would come without fail every year and address our students on all kinds of things, especially astronomy. And we used to look forward to this annual visit. Then it happened that Raja told us about this PAES. Is it up on the slide, Raja?
Yes, it is.
So there was this summit in Hawaii, and Raja wondered whether some of our students would be interested. And sure enough, we found 3 students, and one of our teachers accompanied them, and they tell me about their experience. So would you like me to describe that experience, or would you like to ask me another question?
No, I think that's perfect, thinking about how this first started for your particular high school, and once that idea came, what happened next?
I actually want to go back one step, please, Michelle, because you didn't give enough credit to yourself, Mrs. Carr. I want to actually back up one step. What brought me to her school was indeed my niece. But what brought me was not to give lectures about astronomy. I went there because I was tutoring my niece in math and physics. Every time I went home for the summer, she would grab me and sit me down with her math and physics problems. So her dad said, instead of teaching just her, why don't you gather a group of her classmates and help them with their curriculum? So when he and I took this proposal to Mrs. Carr, she had the vision to say the following. She said, we can find tutors like you all over the place. There are hundreds of tutors around. We don't need you for this. We need you to talk about your research. And I found that to be extremely enlightened and forward-thinking. So that put an end to my tuition ambitions in the school, but it started off this wonderful relation. We had 2 groups of girls and a science teacher each year accompany the group of girls to summit in Hawaii, in Hilo, Hawaii. And those are the 2 topics they studied. In fact, let me read it out to you. It's the dynamics of halo stars in the Milky Way galaxy and the nature and motion of Andromeda stellar disk. Now, this sounds like Greek to you. That's perfectly okay. The point is, it sounded like Greek to the girls when they first encountered this. They read the papers, they understood absolutely nothing. They were completely technical papers, and that was the whole point of the exercise. We said, we're going to measure your growth in the following way. Write down your questions when you first read these papers, and then we'll revisit these questions after you've had a chance to work with us for a few months, and we'll see how many of these questions you can answer yourselves now that you've read the papers and worked with the researchers. So the three girls on the left went to Hawaii in 2014 and represented India at the Pacific Astronomy and Engineering Summit. Actually, in 2013, 3 boys from the Sriram School, Aravalli, went with their science teacher, so that's when we kicked it off. 2014 was Modern High School, 2015 was again Modern High School. And the comments we heard back from the PAES was the 3 students, and each year, the 3 students from India were the best prepared, and they were really talking about authentic STEM research, whereas the other students were, they were presenting science research done by other people. Now, they were presenting science research done by other people as well, but they had the benefit of being mentored by the very people who had done the research. So that was the connection that was different for the students from India. Now, this is what they had to say. Let me see if I can go to the next slide. So this is what the students claimed their learning outcomes were. They gained tremendous self-confidence. That's something we hear all the time. They learned to manage resources, work as a team, and ask questions, whereas before they were worried that the questions they were asking were too basic. We quickly got them over that. No question is too basic. They got to ask one another question. This is the real benefit of working as a team. They asked one another questions. If they couldn't answer the questions among the 3 of them, they knew the question was important and big enough to bring to their mentor. This would have been different if there had been one student working alone. He or she would not have known whether the question is too basic or not. This is the benefit of having a team of 3. They learn to read, ultimately learn to read, understand, sift through, and analyze very difficult text. They learn to prepare and present material from these very technical resources. And of course, they networked with us. They networked with my PhD student, Emily Cunningham, with myself. We did this over Skype. We did this in spite of the 12.5-hour time difference. It took a lot of dedication on both sides, but we made it work. And it was really, really beneficial from my side as a mentor. Here's what a couple of the students said, and I'll let you read this. But they remarked about how, again, they had gained the confidence to explain some of these details that they were daunted by initially. And they did this in spite of this activity not carrying any academic credit. That's really important here. They did this in spite of exam pressure, in spite of classroom pressure. All 6 students were apparently completely enamored of my patience, but I don't know where they got that impression from. This is Mrs. Carr's words, not mine. And they really appreciate my student Emily's empathy. And empathy is really putting yourself in the mindset of another person. So Emily is highly accomplished, knew this material inside out, was able to step into their mindset and explain from their perspective. The 6 students who were involved in research, all 6, these are Mrs. Carr's words. When she says my own impression, it's her impression, that they were completely transformed after this whole experience. They seemed more mature. They already seem very mature to us as mentors. So let me see, there's a call coming in. This is Mrs. Carr again on the call. All 6 of them are doing very well in college. They're placed in well-known institutions in India and abroad. So my next transition is really to a different slide. So let me see if Mrs. Carr's audio is any better, or should we just move on? Should we just keep going? Okay.
And I apologize, because we want to give time for question and answers.
Okay. So we're going to make a slight transition here and talk about a program called the Science Internship Program that I've been involved in as a founder of the program and now its director. So it was a program that started with, it started very simply. It wasn't actually started by me. There was a very persistent teacher who insisted that she would send a couple of her brightest students to my research group over the summer. Those are not the 2 initial students. She promised to send 2, and then she actually sent 3. This is how persistent she was. So she sent 3, and this was in 2009. 3 students. There was 1 mentor. I was the only mentor, and they worked in astrophysics. They did small projects over the weeks of the summer. They were very dedicated. They showed up every day. They carpooled to work with me. We spent that hour talking about what they were going to do that day, and we spent the return commute talking about what they had done during the day. So this is how our summer went. One thing led to another. More students got interested, more mentors got interested. This past summer, we had a program that involved 157 students across 16 different subject areas on the UCSC campus, and I'll list those subjects in a minute. But there were also 73 mentors, not just myself. There were a bunch of mentors. By the way, when I was on the Emirates flight with Michelle, I did a Google search on the Science Internship Program, and the thing that struck me was things were lined up on the right, because I realized things were in Arabic. And when I realized that, I worried what was going on. But anyway, this is what SIPP is about. It's a summer-long program, research internship program for high school students in, really should say, STEAM over there, because we have expanded beyond the traditional STEM. The key thing here is there's very close mentoring of the high school students by PhD students, by professors, and post-PhD researchers who are in between those two stages of their academic careers. There's one-on-one or one-on-few mentoring of these interns. Another key thing is these projects are real. It's all, what we guarantee the students is you're going to be immersed in the research process. Don't expect a product at the end of it. Don't, because a researcher's time is not measured in weeks. It's measured in months. It's measured in years, sometimes in decades. So don't expect to make significant enough progress on the research in 10 weeks. What you should expect is to be immersed and to learn about the process. And so these are existing projects that the students are embedded into. We ask the mentors to carve out a small piece that the students can take ownership of, that they can contribute to. Here's an example of a young woman who goes to high school in the Santa Cruz area. Her name is Erica Escalona. Her parents are quite poor. Her parents never graduated never went past elementary school. They went to middle school, but they didn't finish middle school. And here she is. She was really daunted by the program, decided not to apply in 2015. 2016, someone pushed her over the edge and she applied. And she was in a chemistry lab, which is proudly showing over there. And she was delighted when she was admitted into Princeton in the spring of this year. And she's going to be starting there in the fall in a few weeks. So again, there's 1 or 2 mentors per project and 2 or 3 high school students working together. These are the subject areas that have been covered by our program so far. And you can see there are subjects there that don't fall into traditional STEM. You see economics there, you see computational media, which is the design of video games with social psychology as the thing it's wrapped around, or linguistics, psychology. These are fairly non-traditional STEM subjects, so social sciences more than physical or biological. Here is the distribution by number across the different disciplines. It doesn't include this summer that we've just gone past. I want to emphasize that in these 9 years, there have been over 600 instances of internships, but you see 533 distinct interns. That means many interns, 89 in particular, if you're doing your math, 89 interns, there have been 89 instances of students coming back for a second or third summer. So 10 weeks wasn't enough, they wanted to come back. And it's really very good when a student comes back. It's beneficial for the mentor, for the student, because they've already gone up that learning curve the first summer. These are the demographics. We have a gender imbalance, but not in the traditional sense. We have 60% girls in the program. And this is something that people have asked us, why? And here's why. Our application process requires students to write essays. And I can tell you, as the father of a 19-year-old girl, girls write better than boys at this age. That's all I can say. We have a lot of underserved, underrepresented students in our program this past summer, and we define underserved as students of color, students, low-income students, and first-generation college aspirants, students whose parents haven't been to college. About 100 out of our, I'm going to close this, sorry, about 100 out of our 689 applicants this year qualified as underserved, but in the end, about 50 out of 150 So about a third of our applicants were sort of under-resourced. Okay, let's see what I have next. We have a strong focus on making sure students are not daunted by this program, retaining them, and helping them succeed. We do this using a variety of techniques that I won't bore you with the details of, but the important thing is we teach them Python programming in week 1. They go through a boot camp. They learn about reading papers, about giving talks. So we have all kinds of counseling. We have about 116 schools represented so far. Here's the list. It's in alphabetical order. There's a lot of schools. Most of them are in the US, but some of them are as far away as Moscow in Russia, or Vancouver, Canada, Germany, France. Vienna. So students from around the world. There's a student from Saudi Arabia who attended a program. These are the colleges they attend. And here's what I want to say about the list of colleges. The colleges are not in alphabetical order. They are listed in order of maximum number of alumni attending to minimum number of alumni attending. The most common destination is UC Berkeley. Stanford is the next most common, and those two are, of course, local to the Bay Area. But the other names aren't exactly shabby. MIT and Harvard and Yale and Columbia, Caltech, Princeton, UC Davis, UCLA, UC Santa Cruz. We have 6 students at UC Santa Cruz from the SIPP program so far. So it's not just about feeding into our campus. It's about really training young people to think like scientists. I want to put up one more stat about science competitions. Many of you have heard about the Siemens and Intel science competitions. Currently, every fall, students put in these papers to the competition. About 4,000 students apply to the Siemens competition every year. 10% make it to the semifinals. I'm proud to say that of the students from our program who apply, about a third make it to the semifinals, 33% instead of 10%. And we make up between 25% and a third of all of California's Siemens semifinalists. Our program alone accounts for about a quarter to a third of all Siemens semifinalists. Just to give you an idea of what these projects look like, this is what it looks like from a mentor's perspective at the beginning of the summer. They write down a paragraph talking about why the project is important and what tasks the students will carry out. This is in astronomy, astrophysics. Here's one in computer science, computer engineering. I think these slides are going to be made available to donations for Raj. Okay. This is in ecology, evolutionary biology. And you can find these on the SIPP website easily. So this is what I have about the SIPP program.
Well, and that's what I was curious, Raja, taking this from a local context, where do you see this going?
So one of the things, we saw those 4 steps, Michelle, in the deepening levels of STEM engagement. And as I said, the 3rd and 4th steps are very hard to scale. They are very hard to scale because one mentor can at most reach 5 or 6 students, maybe 10 students over a summer, but they can't reach millions of students in the same way that a David Attenborough video can reach millions, if not billions, of children. So the only way to scale this up is to have more mentors. So we are on a mission to see other researchers engage with high school students. The fact that we are getting applicants from around the world, high school students applying to Santa Cruz to leave their homes, leave their families, stay there for 10 weeks, is not the ideal situation. We welcome them in, of course, but that's not the ideal situation. They're much better off working with researchers who are close to them. So we are trying to create a network, a community of practice. We call this SPHERE. It stands for STEM programs for high schoolers engaging in research early. It's named the SPHERE because we really want this to be a global network. We've talked to programs around the world. There are many programs that engage high school students. We're interested in programs that are in those 3rd and 4th categories. That is open-ended research and sort of controlled research. We want to create this community of practice, share best practices across these programs, and we want to create an online directory of programs for the users to use, that is students, parents, teachers. And we really want to grow the mentor pool. That's really important. So the mentor pool, we want to make it easier for today's high school students to find these opportunities. And one of the best ways to do that is to encourage students who've had these experiences to remember this experience when they become researchers, we want them to give it back. We want them to pay it forward in the same way that a child can't pay their parents back, but they can pay it forward by parenting their children well. And this is the culture we're trying to create. And what I'm trying to do is talk to researchers around the world in a variety of topics. It really helps if school students, school teachers, parents of school students would encourage researchers in their area to help make this kind of connection. So in Calcutta, we've been talking to Presidency University, to the astronomers there, but it would be really helpful if you all could help make these sorts of connections. There are high school students, brilliant high school students all over the world. There are brilliant researchers all over the world. And it's very important to make these local connections. So here are the conversations we've had so far, have extended to about 120 organizations in 20 countries. But the network, the formal launch of the network is going to be this fall. And that's what I have. Thank you.
Which schools are interested in, or who are you working with in terms of the Sphere Network?
So the founding partners of the Sphere Network have been SIPP, of course, the UCSC SIPP program. There's a couple of programs at Stanford, Berkeley. There are a few programs in the New York area. That's in the US. In Canada, we've talked to the University of British Columbia. They have we've talked to Queen's University, University of Toronto. I can go on and on. There's a long list like that. We've talked to the Ethiopian astronomical observatories. There's a bunch of countries in Europe that are all crowded together over there that we've talked to. I've mostly talked to astronomers and some cases to computer scientists at these different organizations. We've had strong conversations through Google with researchers in Australia and Sydney. In India, we've talked to Pune, to the Inter-University Center for Astronomy and Astrophysics, but also to Presidency University in Kolkata. China, Beijing University, so on. So there's a long list. Brazil, we're now in Chile as well. So
Excellent. Exactly.
Is 10 weeks considered adequate for this
10 weeks is certainly considered adequate for an immersion in the process. It's certainly, as I said before, it's certainly not enough to expect the student to derive any results from those 10 weeks. It's unpredictable what can happen in any researcher's 10-week period. But 10 weeks is long. I wouldn't say there is any hard and fast time frame. I certainly think the longer the amount of time, the deeper the immersion, of course. It's 10 weeks of full-time work that the students put in. I know that one of the things that will get in the way is school holidays are not always 10 weeks long all over the country. So in India, in the context of India, we've thought about this a little bit and said we should encourage students to engage in 3 one-month chunks. Because instead of having one long holiday, you have a summer holiday, you might have a puja holiday, and you certainly have winter holidays. So the cadence of the research need not be exactly what it is at UC Santa Cruz. That's certainly, there's nothing sacred about that. But the depth of engagement is important. And whether that's achieved in 1 3-month chunk or 1 2.5-month chunk as it is for our program, or 3 1-month chunks, that part is not, it's not critical one way or the other.
Raja, could we, before we get into too many questions, could you show us what some of the students, I think you've got some presentations.
I've got some videos here that I can show, absolutely.
And I'll share, I had the opportunity, not this last Saturday because we were on an airplane, but the Saturday prior to actually attend 4 of these sessions. And Raja and I have worked together off and on over the last probably 5 years, and yet I'd been to the opening ceremonies, but I'd never been to the actual research day. And I just want to tell you before we get started, I was absolutely astonished listening to the students. I never in a million years would have guessed these were high school.
Confirming that the M87 is the parent galaxy of the orphan globular clusters, which are in the massive galaxy M87 in the Virgo cluster of galaxies. So we're going to be confirming that M87 is their parent galaxy, and then we're going to be finding their ages and metallicities.
So some terminology that you might need to know before we start. So a globular cluster is a densely packed group of stars, and from now on we'll be calling that a GC. An orphan is a GC that doesn't have a parent galaxy. So if you imagine a galaxy as like a parent and a GC as like a child, then orphans have like lost their parent and then they're just by themselves. And so satellites are GCs that are actually bound to a galaxy, so they have a parent. And spectrum is a graph of light intensity as a function of wavelength, and metallicity is the fraction of elements that are heavier than helium and hydrogen. So this is a rough sketch of the Virgo cluster of galaxies. So the Virgo cluster is a big group of galaxies. It's made up of about 1,500 galaxies, and in the center of it is M87, which is the largest galaxy in Virgo cluster. And M87 is made up of about 13,000 GCs, and the GCs are like the green circles. And around M87 are many dwarf elliptical galaxies, which are galaxies that are much smaller than M87. So when we started this, we were originally targeting the dwarf elliptical galaxies to search for satellite GCs, but then we came across 47 orphan GCs that we weren't sure who their host galaxy was, and we thought it was M87, so we did some research on this.
So because M87 is incredibly massive and it's at the center of the Virgo cluster, we thought that it was eating or cannibalizing the other galaxies around it. So our orphans probably formed in another galaxy that's not M87, and then that galaxy was destroyed by M87, so they were orphaned from their original parent galaxies, but then adopted by M87 because now they're orbiting M87. So GCs and their original parent galaxies share a lot of the same properties. So we wanted to find the ages and metallicities of the GCs so we could find the ages and metallicities of their original parent galaxies and then find what kinds of galaxies they were.
Okay, so this can go on and on, but I just want to say that the young woman on the left, on your left, and the young man on the right, would you believe me if I said they're both PhD students? No. The young woman has just finished class 9. The young man has just finished class 10. But they are speaking with the authority and technical knowledge of PhD students.
It was so impressive. This is just a little snippet, and imagine the whole day. And Raja, you might show them the webpage because there are many of these videos online, and I think you've captured or really cataloged them over the years that the students have been doing the presentations.
Right. No, we do have.
So there's a lot of them if you want to take a look.
Our actual videos are password protected for a reason, because much of this research is not published yet. So we don't want to disseminate the videos, but contact me if you're interested. But this is the main web page for our program right there.
Excellent. Well, I think at this time, then, we want to make sure to have plenty of time. I think we've got about 15 minutes. I want to be very sensitive to your time for additional questions, and I think there have been some terrific questions so far.
Yes, please.
I'm so sorry, but if you could just, clearly define how does a school come on board for a program like this? I mean, what is the timeline involved? What are the different steps?
So
I know you have worked with schools in India, but
we have worked with schools in India. So that's a very good question. I assume you could all hear the question. So the Science Internship Program itself is open to any student. Anyone can apply. You don't need to be a partner school to apply. The partnerships I was talking about is something we're trying to create with research institutions around the world for them to take on local high school students in their research. That partnership, I would love to work with, if you know of researchers who are geographically close to the high school you're connected to, I would love to talk to them about the virtues of this engagement. I can tell you that you were referring to high schoolers applying to this program. For that, no partnership is required, really. Our partnership with Modern High School has not been about the Science Internship Program. It's just been about a particular summit to which students were invited to represent India, China, and a few other countries. So that one was a one-off thing, but the Science Internship Program is running. We had 700 applicants this last spring. We encourage students to apply from all over the world. If there are particular logistical challenges with going there for 10 weeks, that finances too. So we do offer need-based scholarships, but they don't cover travel. They cover the cost of the program, the tuition of the program, as well as they cover the cost of lodging and local transportation, but not international. Oh, that's a good question. Our tuition for the 10-week program is $3,000 is what it was, which is which is average compared to programs, actually on the low side for such a long program. There are, most programs are 4, 6 weeks. Most programs, though, involve students sitting in classrooms and listening to lectures. This is not at all about that. I just want to be clear on that. So the lodging on campus is a comparable amount. It's a little bit more than 3K if a student was staying for all 10 weeks of the program. It's a little bit more than that. We can go into the details of that. Those details are actually on this particular web page. You can see ucsc-sipp.org. If you go into program details, for example, and you look at the application process, things like, and it's just coming up now, but you'll see that things like, it's just loading, but you'll see that things like fees and etc. all listed over here. So it's completely transparent on our page. You can certainly see that. The dates we list are for 2017, but we'll replace these with dates for 2018 in due course. Other questions, please?
In the very back.
Yes, we do. Our scholarships, so the question is, do we offer scholarships for this program? We do. Our scholarships are entirely need-based rather than merit-based. So we go through the selection first, and then we ask students if they, the fees are transparent when students apply. So we ask students if they accept our admission offer or they accepted conditional and financial assistance. That's a question we ask. And if they make a conditional acceptance, then we look at their finances and give out. And our financial aid, when we offer it, covers the academic component of the program plus lodging. Follow-up question over there, and then we'll come to you. Go ahead, please. No, that's something I would love to know. This is a great topic for discussion. What avenues, and please speak up if your students have been engaged in research. Has it been through a systematic effort through the school, or are these one-off connections that students have made with researchers they know? Please, anyone, feel free to speak up to this.
I'm speaking. Okay, I'm Hema, career counselor from Oak Ridge, Bangalore. We had about 3 students, and this is through the network which I had built in through LinkedIn. And there is Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore offered a summer camp course. It was a short-term course for students of grade 9 to 12, and then 4 students from my campus took over those course, and they completed with a mentorship that they gained. Because these students were doing really good, and the professor said exactly the same platform, and where he could help the student come up with a protocol to work on a research.
Got you. So in terms of those 4 categories, access enrichment, research skills, a controlled project versus open-ended, what category would you say their activities fell into?
The first 3.
First 3. Excellent. Excellent. I would love to, so we are building the Sphere network. I would love to include the partnership, the network you've already built into this, because the idea is for us to not keep reinventing the wheel separately in different parts of the world. I mean, we've learned a lot from our program. We'd like to learn from other groups as well. So please get in touch with me. We'd love to connect you to this.
I think that would really help you, because we have a lot of institutions in India as well, where for astrophysics and also other fields.
Right.
And then if we're able to build it within our own geographical sector, it is easier.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's a global network that's trying to create local connections. Is a good way to describe this. And I would, you're in a very fortunate place in Bangalore, because there are a lot of research institutes there. But it's a little more challenging if there's a school in a rural part of the world, of course. But that's
there is sorry to interrupt, but there is another model which another third-party institution or organization wanted to work, but then it's a wonderful way of looking at the project. It is more of virtual. Like, for example, when you say 10 weeks of students attending there at US, we could rather look at, having, we can look at virtual sessions happening over 4 months on Saturdays, or where you have a mentor at the school. For schools which want to make this possible, we can have mentor at the school on Saturdays or whichever is possible, and then we have group of students working on it. Then you have a Skype.
That's an excellent point. No, and there's our engagement with modern high school students has been entirely virtual, and this brings up an excellent point, which is there are many categories of research today that don't require physical presence in a laboratory
Exactly.
or in a field. Even after the laboratory data are collected, there's a lot of analysis that goes on that just requires your presence in front of a computer. And those data-heavy projects, which could be in any field really, those data-heavy projects, in astronomy, we don't take our students to the telescopes. We collect the data, the mentors collect the data, the students do the post-processing. So that's an excellent way to think about this.